one of the studies that was done on tumor promotion, one of the cancer studies that nobody seems to talk about, was quite interesting because they showed that tumor promotion was actually maximal at quite low levels of exposure. All right, so this was from things like cell phones. So things are not always obvious, and that makes things very difficult. Now, the other thing I want to say is, there was some discussion about SARS values. SARS values, you're looking at heating.
Specific absorption rate?
Yeah.
You're looking at heating, and so those are totally irrelevant to what's actually going on here that we're concerned about. So what's measured is something that is not relevant to the biological effects that we're concerned about. The second thing, another thing which is related to this, is these devices. Any of these devices, none of them are tested biologically for safety. Period. They're simply put out to an unsuspecting public based on a theory that we should have known was wrong 40 years ago. That the theory is that it's only heating. Okay, and rather than actually testing things biologically, which is the only way you can test things at this point in time, we don't have any other way of testing other than doing biological tests. That doesn't have to be in human beings, but it has to be biological. So we're in an absolutely insane world, and I mean it's just crazy. And when you have people like as you saw in the video, somebody says, well, the results aren't consistent about this. When you have all of these complexities, you have effects of pulsations, different pulsation patterns get different results. You have very complex dose-response curves. You know that different cells respond differently, so you look at one cell type, you may get a very different response than another. You're going to get all kinds of variations. Those are not inconsistencies, those are just biological heterogeneity. We're really complex, and this system is very complex. And so the fact that you get different results doesn't mean that there's any conflicts with the studies where people actually find effects. And there are many, many of those. And so, for example, in a recent paper, Dimitris Panagopoulos and his colleagues published a paper where they looked at 48 different studies on genuine cell phone radiation. 46 of them showed biological effects that were medically relevant, medically important. 46 out of 48. When you look at studies of simulated cell phones, things that look a little bit like cell phones but aren't really, most of them in fact didn't see effects. It's very easy for industry to argue, well, it's inconsistent. In fact, it's not inconsistent.